Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, the last year, um, main reason I haven't done podcasts is because of the new fentanyl test strip program that I created for DanceSafe, which is now wildly successful. I'm even in negotiations with CVS to stock our strips nationally in all other stores. So like that has been so time consuming and stressful, and stress may be one reason my immune system's out of whack. I've been just
Yeah.
working too hard, but I helped develop the strips with the manufacturer because fentanyl test strips have to be uh, assessed very differently for drug checking than for urine testing again. And so we basically came up with a new improved strip designed for drug checking purposes, and the program is wildly successful. DanceSafe's making over $2 million a year, and we've got over a dozen state health departments and 400 other county and local city buying from us. It's like my house has turned into a shipping center, and so that's really what's been taking up all my time.
That's awesome. I'm glad to know that you're, making progress on like things, even though you seem quiet online, still being like very beneficial towards like the missions you have and what it seems like you're trying to like reach for.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wanted to like record this conversation because I found out about DanceSafe about maybe like 5 months ago, and I found DanceSafe very interesting, and also I found the information that you put out very interesting because I had been I had been reading about psychedelics, and then also my two cousins had passed away from overdoses, and I've been learning a lot about both subjects. I guess you can like pretty much put them towards like learning about psychedelics and the benefits of them and psychedelic assisted therapy, and then also the other aspect of harm reduction and creating a safer environment for the masses. As I've been reading, I've probably read about like 10 books or so stemming between like psychedelic medicine by Dr. Richard Lewis Miller, which is how I actually first found you because DanceSafe was mentioned in there. Fentanyl Incorporation, Drugs Unlimited,
Good books.
Fantastic Fun Guy, similar to books to those. And a lot of the concepts are just like over repeated about how impactful the drug war has been negatively on society. And at one of my cousin's funerals, I actually made a speech that I want to share like a 2 minute clip from the recording that I have. And during this speech, I actually talked a lot about what DanceSafe like kind of has to offer, like in terms of I kind of like branched it in this audio where like I was like there needs to be more awareness so people like are more familiar of like, hey, these drugs on the street are very adulterated, and then also that test kits need to be more widely available. And it's funny enough because like I didn't even know test strips really existed. Like I like maybe heard them like once or twice from some podcast or whatever. It's like, like I knew it was possible, but I never looked into it. And then when this happened with my cousins, I thought about it more, but I still didn't research. But then I saw Dance Safe, and like I can't describe to you like the feelings I felt like looking in Dance Safe because I'm like, this is like exactly what I was like thinking about when like this is like actually my vision. Like I don't I don't get how like this vision isn't like widely spread of like, hey, this can actually help us solve the issues that are going around in society. So I want to play like this 2 minute recording of that clip.
Okay.
What it just shows her disabilities made her stronger. She knew she had to work hard she knew she had to work harder because of them. So that's just what she did. And I'm proud of Emily for that. As much as I love Emily, I want to take this moment to realize the fact that substance unfairly took her life. I will say this does not define Emily or Eddie for that matter. They are so much bigger than that. They are so much bigger than the things that led them to their passing. Let that be clear. But despite that, I feel like we cannot move successfully forward without acknowledging there was and there is an epidemic with substances. Like I mentioned previously, one of Emily's greatest strengths was being able to be uncomfortable. She would speak her mind and let you know how she felt. Along similar lines, this is how I feel about talking about this matter. I just want to say, I feel like we don't have a drug problem. I feel like it's much deeper than that. I feel like these people were making decisions at the moment and they didn't want to go this way. No one knowing the circumstances would take the substances that they took knowing the outcome. I feel like this gives us great opportunity to look at the solutions the solutions that help relieve this epidemic. I know personally I'm not an expert in this field. However, I will say my opinion is I personally would like to see so much more awareness. Because the more we show people these situations actually occur, the more people will second guess their actions if the situation arises for them personally. I will also say I will be looking for any situation that pushes for harsher punishment for people trafficking seriously lethal substances, because it is so unfair that these people can't be held accountable for the events. And I know Emily and Eddie wouldn't want to go through this, but it is what it is. But if it wasn't there in the first place, we could all appreciate them right here, right now. I will also have to mention this because it is a little bit more of my inexpert opinion, but if there's any push for drug testing kits being more available, I'm here for it. I'm sure Emily or Eddie, not sure if Emily or Eddie would have used them, but I know everyone in this room is a little upset how often they hear about these overdosing stories. So I'm not an expert, but I don't think we can move past this without hopes of having more of our loved ones stay with us and not be a victim of similar situations. So, yeah.
Is that you speaking?
Yes.
And those are your cousins?
Yes.
Can I ask what substance they thought they were taking when they overdosed?
That's a good question. So I can say for my cousin Eddie, I'm not sure about him, but I think it was heroin and I think it was fentanyl. Uh, and then also with Emily, we actually found out that we didn't know what it was, but we also did not find fentanyl in her system. I need to like reach back out to my aunt to like for see if like they came up with any better information. But yeah, it was a crazy 2 weeks in the hospital because she was just in a coma basically for 2 weeks. But yeah, it was difficult. Like making that speech was difficult. And
How long ago did these have?
so Eddie actually passed away. Eddie was the first one to pass away, and that was in May of 2021. And then Emily just the next year in May 2022. So yeah. Yeah. And it's really unfortunate, but you know, like all we can do, like I kind of mentioned that speech is all we can do is kind of look forward and like, you know, what can we do to like make these happen less likely. I had on Instagram once there was like an alert about how, hey, watch out for buying Adderall on the street because we're finding it laced with fentanyl. And then like someone was like promoting like testing kits, whatever. Hey, these are available here if you know you want to test your drugs or whatever. And like someone was like, enabling these people. And like I mentioned to them, I'm like, dude, like I would pay like an extraordinary amount of money if like that was the alternate case scenario for like my two cousins. Like I would much rather them here and like taking you can take whatever drugs you want as long as you're here. Like, you know, I'd rather much have them here than, you know, like so
Yeah.
yeah. But
I mean, that's the crux of the debate that's been going on for a long time, that the approach should be just say no, right? The Nancy
yeah.
Reagan line, and that any efforts to help people who use drugs do so more safely is enabling.
And
And some of that comes from real life and quite common situations where people are struggling with substance use disorders, addiction, although some people don't like that word. I think it's useful. And where like their drug use and whatever they're getting from it is outweighed by the harms that are happening to them in their life, but they still keep using. Like that's sort of the definition of addiction. When you keep engaging in a behavior, whether it's drugs or sex or gambling, to the detriment of the rest of your life, why are you still doing that? Because most people don't. If any behavior, including drug use, starts to have negative consequences, the vast majority of people will moderate their use because they value other things besides using drugs, right? I've done that in my personal drug use, knowing when I'm using too much of something, or it's just like kind of, but some people who are suffering with this type of addiction or problematic drug use, they can't moderate in that way. And for those people, very often abstinence appears to be the only way. To some people, it appears that abstinence is the only way to save these people from a downward trajectory towards death. But those of us on the harm reduction side of this debate say, no, you can take positive steps to improve your life even while you're engaged in drug use. Use a little less. Test your drugs to make sure you know what you're taking and the amount you're taking, things like that. And that is a more empowering approach that says no matter how down and out you are, or how desperate you are, whatever you're trying to escape from by engaging in this behavior, you can always take any little positive step forward is a success, and that's more empowering than the sort of 12-step model where you have to surrender and admit you're powerless. And so harm reduction has been very critical of that in general, although it works for some people, but just not most. And then you have the fact that the vast majority of people who use drugs do not use them problematically at all.
Yeah.
And so for those people, this shouldn't even really be a debate. People who are dying from an adulterated drug market because drugs are unregulated and left to criminals, literally. Not that those are bad people, right? But when there's no regulation, the manufacturers and suppliers of drugs are by definition criminals, and they're not always selling you what you think they are. They're not even selling you often what they think they have, right?
Yeah.
But the idea that just being abstinent is the way to go. It has been shown that does not work, even for people with problematic drug use, much less for people who are casual recreational users, and are gaining great benefits from their use of drugs without negative consequences. Like, why would those people stop using? Those people need tools so that they don't die from an accidental poisoning, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I would like to know like your like top reasons of like why the ending the drug war would be positive, but I would also like to like bring up to start this conversation is like I today we looked at Johan Hari his information, and it's one of the things that I think that convinces people that ending the drug war would actually be beneficial is the fact that the amount of crime that would go down just due to like protection that we would get because we we don't have people selling alcohol committing vicious crimes against each other because we have protection. You can't go to another liquor store that's competition and rob them, murder them, do whatever. And because that other liquor store has protection, they can call the police. But when you have criminals and gangs, they can just easily go to another person and take out the competition. And you can't go calling the police to go help yourself because that's not an option because you would be prosecuted. And that let alone like there's so many reasons, but crime is one of them. If you could like outline some of the reasons why ending the drug war wouldn't be so bad and would actually be beneficial for society.
Yeah, the violence around organized crime and is a big one that no one points out more clearly, I think, than Johan Hari does in his book Chasing the Scream. The example you gave, regulated drug markets eliminate the violence, right? The topic of legalization or ending the drug war involves sort of two different types of approach. One is we call full legalization, where the government regulates the supply in some way. And the other is decriminalization,
Yeah,
which
big
simply
difference.
means
Yeah.
that you're not going to get arrested for possessing drugs for personal use. And I mean, aside from the fact that the two legally regulated drugs kill more people than most others, right?
Yeah.
Alcohol and tobacco. Actually, I don't even know if that's true anymore with fentanyl, because the number of fentanyl deaths is like skyrocketed.
Yeah.
You know, at least 80, 90,000 a year now, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how many people are dying from cancer from cigarette smoking and alcohol related deaths in total. But I would bet it's pretty close. Aside from that, right? We're not, when you ban a drug, you essentially end the public conversation around safer use, pushing those conversations into the silence and the shadows. So, DanceSafe's always been about, my goal in starting it has been to open the conversation and create a more responsible drug culture, if you will, where people talk about their health and safety and how to use responsibly. But when you're risking arrest talking about these things, you're not going to do it. You might do it amongst your friends who use drugs as well, but you're not going to talk to your teachers. You're not going to talk to your doctors. I mean, even today, I go to the doctor and they're like, I will say no if they ask me, do you use illegal drugs, right? Because all it's going to do is put a red flag in there and they're going to make these
Gosh.
assumptions about me. And I know that my use of psychedelics is
Yeah.
not impacting my health. I know more about psychedelics than they do. And
Yeah.
I don't want, so I'm not going to talk to my doctor about my drug use. I'm
Yeah.
just not going to do it.
It
Uh,
it's so unfortunate with that like that in mind is how, you know, in other countries, I think in Sweden, like previously in history, where like they allow you to continue a drug, like in Sweden, like where they allow you to do the heroin program where they'll help you out and like ease off of it and like take as much as you like until like you're ready to get off, rather than like if you like tell your doctor you're taking some like painkillers that you're not prescribed, they instantly like cut you off and leave you to the streets that have more dangerous drugs. So like it's unfortunate you can't talk to your doctors about it because they won't be able to like your help go, like you might be get some help from the doctor, and like as soon as you tell them that, you're like your help's going to go down here because they don't want anything a part of it. There's a liability, and it's really unfortunate we can't have help in society because of how it's seen. But like we need to stop stigmatizing people, that way we can actually help them out. It's not beneficial to be like, oh, you're doing those substances, we can't help you out, like we can't be a part of like we it's
yep. And that's particularly ironic when it comes to opioids, because the truth is you can take high dose opioids every day for the rest of your life and live a long, healthy, and productive life, as long as you're taking known doses and at the same time every day. The chaotic use patterns go away. The problem is when you're using illicit opioids today, you never know the dose. You never know how you're going to pay for it. You have to commit crimes and yourself in order to get the money to supply your medicine for yourself. But if people who are prescribed long-term opioids, like, still can go to work, they can we're talking thousands of milligrams of oxy a day. There are people with major, prescriptions with major pain who are able to function normal lives on high dose opioids, daily high dose opioids. And
Yeah.
for fentanyl, it was really common for very responsible heroin users who were very careful in how much they took to live long, healthy lives. No one would ever know. So the Swiss programs, they're in Germany, they're in other European countries a little bit. Hit the heroin assisted treatment or heroin maintenance, because even treatment isn't even really the thing. It's just we're going to give you your medicine. You can have as much as you want, and you get on with your daily life. And these people live fine lives. Like
Yeah.
when they don't have to spend all their money on their drug, they can put food in the fridge for their children. Again, their self-esteem goes
Yeah.
up. They may or may not choose to keep doing it right at that point. And then this points out how self-esteem is a huge part of it, and that how we demonize and stigmatize people who use drugs as if they're unethical people, hedonists, immoral, whatever, that manifests the very low self-esteem that contributes to misuse and abuse. When you
Yeah.
think that there's no way to use a drug responsibly, you might as well just take more because you don't care. You're
Mm.
proving what the culture is telling you. I like to refer to it sometimes as cultural gaslighting.
Mm.
Tell people who use drugs that there's something wrong with them. So therefore, when everyone's telling you there's something wrong with you, you're going to start to believe it, and then you're going to start to misuse and abuse those drugs yourself, and then it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. But if we acknowledge that drugs have benefits, the vast majority of people don't develop problematic drug use. There are ways to do it responsibly, and we provide people with the tools so that they can. We're always going to have some people that get in trouble. Look how, look at how many alcoholics are there. Alcohol
Yeah.
is one of the worst drugs out there, and we're always going to be dealing with people that get in trouble with drugs. But
And
we can reduce that by taking a rational public health approach.
yeah, and since like alcohol is legal, the best protocols right now is just to promote safe use, to promote like, like what not to do. And I just wanted to comment back on how you're talking about like if most drugs were like you're talking about opioids particularly, but like for most drugs, if you take a pure substance, you're it's relatively safe. There's not many drugs out there that are like inherently, if you take the right dose, going to be dangerous. It's all about like, the poison in the dose. And like I kind of like want to like rephrase like just say no to like just say whatever the hell you want. Just know the benefits and harms. And as long as you take listen, if you take the right dose, like it's gonna be not problematic for the most people. But then it's very important, like what you said about like about like about your self-esteem and your identity with it. And almost in my cousin's funeral, I wanted to mention like, like we don't have a drug problem, whatever. And more so like we had like a purpose problem where like if you don't know like if you don't know where your life is going and you're struggling and you reach out to be on a substance, and then it kind of snowballs like you're talking about, where like, oh, you start to take it and then you can't reach out to people, and then it gets worse, and then you're getting what you said, society gaslighting, and it kind of like snowballs. And if we can like prevent that window and be able to like bridge the gap between being able to help people, I think it would make a huge difference. And yeah, yeah, and also on the difference between legalization and decriminalization, it's also very unfortunate how the difference is so huge, but like pushing decriminalization is like the only like manageable thing right now, because getting it to people's heads that like a good portion of drugs should be legal, it's very hard to portray that. But
So I think
um,
decriminalization might be enough,
okay,
actually,
well,
for most drugs.
I wanted to mention how legalization, how how legalization would lead to pure drugs, which pretty much eliminates the adulterated market. And then how legalization also helps with crime. Like the aspect of like, you can't go to a liquor store and rob another liquor store. Like it would give people selling, the drug dealers protection, and if they had protection, there'd be less crime. So yeah, I guess this would be the two big things, but I'd like to hear your opinion that we were just talking about. So yeah, more pure drugs and protection. And you say decriminalization would be enough, and I like to hear about that. But
Well, could be a place of resignation, having worked for so many decades in drug policy reform, to realize it's probably very unlikely that we're going to see uh, legalized and regulated safe supply of most
yeah,
drugs.
we
Um,
can. Yeah,
because there's liability issues, like you can't sue the government when you die from alcohol or smoking because like all the warnings are there, right? But like we
we
got
can't
to
do that with drugs.
but you can't, right? Because like they've sort of been grandfathered in. But if Congress were to pass a law right now, sort of legalizing cocaine, for example, like there would be there would be a lot of cocaine deaths, just like there already are. People are going to die no matter how much you
Yeah,
educate people, right? And then people would be up in arms. Like nobody wants to take responsibility anymore, like for legalizing and regulating a drug that is inevitably going to result in deaths. They worry about lawsuits. They would much rather uh, not take responsibility, keep things illegal, and then feel like it's not their problem that people are dying. That might be cynical, but I think we're sort of up against that, even though much of the reform movement is calling for a safe supply. But so then you can think about safe supply in a slightly different way. You can think about legal regulation in a slightly different way than anyone's allowed to go to the government center and get their cocaine or their heroin, right? The way that the Swiss model works for heroin is you have to prove that you're already addicted to the opioids, and that you've tried treatment and it hasn't worked. And only then are you allowed into the program where you can go and get your heroin 3 times a day, as up to 3 times a day, which is as much as you really need with heroin because it's longer acting. So, and so they started this program because they wanted to shrink the supply of heroin, because if they remove all of the addicts from the heroin market, then there would be less profits to be made selling heroin, because even though daily users are a small percentage of the people who use heroin, they purchase and consume the vast bulk of heroin. And today it's all fentanyl in the US. There's still heroin in Europe, though, right? Point was, 20 years ago when Swiss began this program, they wanted to remove all of the daily users. Apology for calling them addicts. That's a stigmatized term, but I like the word addiction, but not addict. Anyway, the daily users could now suddenly go and get their heroin for free from the government, and all these dealers, including the users themselves who were selling in order to fund, uh, get money to buy their own heroin, right? They all went away, and there's far less heroin on the market and far less new opioid users. And they thought, and it worked. It was very successful. What they didn't realize is how it was going to be so positive for the users themselves, and they were going to get their lives back on track. And then after 3 years, half of them quit heroin for good. Like that is a remarkable statistic, because any type of treatment program that we have, whether it's 12-step, even the harm reduction based treatment, even going to jail, forced abstinence, right? Only about 5% of people decide to quit using completely. But yet you just give people free heroin as much as they want with no stigma at all, and half of 50% after
big
3 years
difference.
decide to quit. So that just goes to show the whole point about gaslighting and
Yeah.
self-esteem, why it is that people get into trouble with drugs. but that's a digression. This is a type of legal regulation where,
Yeah.
you talk about legalization to people without them assuming that, oh, that you want children to be able to go and buy heroin in a 7-Eleven. No, 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 we're not talking about that. We're just
Yeah.
talking about helping the people who are already in trouble and changing that dynamics of the market so there's less heroin out there. I mean, these days you want to, like, I hate to admit it, but the only thing that's going to get rid of fentanyl is heroin maintenance programs. Fentanyl test strips aren't going to get rid of fentanyl.
Yeah.
People are using the strips who don't want fentanyl. And then even some people are using them because fentanyl is the only opioid out there, and they want to make sure that they're actually getting it, right? That's how fucked up this situation has become, and so it's not going to go away unless we can provide people with medically assisted opioids for whatever use they want. Like when you get, like, okay, we recognize opioids as a important medicine to control physical pain. They're the most powerful painkillers out there, and physical pain is damaging to a person. You need painkillers, or you will die more quickly. You will suffer psychological trauma. Nobody doubts this. Then we also need to consider opioid addiction a condition that is solved by opioid maintenance itself, right? But because the problems, again, from opioids result mainly from the chaotic use patterns that result from prohibition, where if you had a steady supply and you took them at the same time every day, and you weren't stigmatized around it, you can live a long, healthy life. And the studies have shown, that improves people's lives. So we allow methadone and buprenorphine and some other drugs, but we really need to give people the stronger ones, or they're going to continue to get them from the street. And the the illicit market will continue unabated, killing more and more people every year, which is what we're seeing. Stimulants are a little bit more difficult to talk about legalization and regulation because they're a little harder on your body. And for example, daily meth users, it's a lot more difficult to maintain a healthy, productive life if you're using meth every day, unless you're using just a tiny bit in the morning, right? But I personally don't know of anyone who has gotten away with daily meth use for very long, including myself, who had a problem with it in my late 20s. Um, uh, so like, how do you legally regulate that? But there's also models that are being discussed that can put that in place, similar to the heroin maintenance ones, right? Not that you let anyone just come and get it, but people who are already daily meth users can come and get their dose in a safe environment. You would at least then be reducing the stigma, opening the opportunity for public discussion, and making sure there's no fentanyl in their meth. But I like to promote decriminalization because I think it's going to be far easier to pass. A lot of countries have already done it. A lot of states are already doing it. And DanceSafe is an example of the private sector offering quality control tools to help people. The problem is that because of prohibition, many people are still afraid to purchase testing kits. There are a handful of drug checking programs cropping up in the US right now, like DanceSafe, where people can bring their drugs to get them tested. But if you decriminalized, these things would flourish. If it was
Yeah.
no
It
longer
looks like you're about to get cut off because of Zoom. So we can call back, or like
same
the
link.
yeah, I let me figure out. I'll send you another link and we'll figure it out. All
Hi,
right,
Ian.
there we go. And we're back.
Yeah, these conversations about how to legally regulate different drugs they're difficult ones, and which is why I've lean more towards advocating for decriminalization, because I think it might be enough in the sense of uh, when you know when it's no longer illegal to possess a drug for personal use, you open the public conversation, and people can now speak to their doctors and their teachers and their parents and their non-drug using friends, and safer use conversations can happen, as well as services expand and open up to provide uh, treatment, counseling, peer-based discussion, drug checking services. We, I started drug checking in 1998, right? It was the first one to do it, and it was a fairly politically hostile environment where I got criticized, for enabling drug use, but now, as public perception has changed a lot and politically it's become more accepted, there are drug checking programs that are now city and county and state funded, where people can bring their drugs into. It's not just at a rave or a festival with DanceSafe. You can bring your drugs, in Manhattan. There's like 3 centers now that bring your drugs to them. They'll test them for you. And so we're sort of on our way to providing some quality control in the market and some healthier uh, public conversations around drugs and addiction and safer use, which I think will go a long way towards helping. Um, Fentanyl is the one monkey wrench in this whole thing, because it's just so dangerous and
Yeah.
impossible to dose correctly, which is why I think, along with decriminalization, we really need heroin maintenance. We really need people to be able to
Yeah.
get, let's call it opiate of choice maintenance, not just methadone or buprenorphine, because people will get their methadone and they'll still use heroin because methadone doesn't get them high enough, right? But if people can get their safe supply, their free safe supply, but like when you think about that, right, like how difficult that is, we
Safe.
can't even get free socialized medicine in this country. Like, how
Yeah,
are we
like
going to get free medicine, free heroin medicine for people, right? Like our culture is so screwed up when it comes to public health.
like insulin.
Exactly,
Like
exactly.
crazy. Yeah, no, it's like dumb. It's like yeah, like I have like so many things I want to ask you, but since I just brought that up, like yeah, it's so crazy. Like if we can't even get like insulin like provided for people with diabetics, and it has to be hard in your head, like how are we going to do this for like heroin? As like you've been and working the you founded DanceSafe in 1998 and have been working in harm reduction for over 25 years. How do you keep like your focus and like any like how do you keep moving forward rather like being like this isn't going any like there's no hope. Like how do you keep hope?
Well, I like to say the only, I've been an activist since I was a teenager, working on a lot of different causes, from the environment to workers' rights, et cetera. Like, it feels like the only thing we've made progress on is drug policy reform. I used to say we made a lot of progress on, women's rights, gay rights, et cetera, but that seems to have gone backwards over the last, since 2016 at least. But drug policy reform is actually a really hopeful field to be in, despite the fentanyl crisis increasing fatalities so dramatically. Uh, it's become like so far more politically accepted today than it was when I started DanceSafe.
That's
You know,
definitely
I
true.
I give presentations to the FDA and CDC now, right? The SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse Mental Health uh, Services Administration, has allowed their grant recipients to buy fentanyl test strips with that money. The CDC has issued memos to municipalities across the country, encouraging them to open drug checking centers. Like, I regularly talk to people high up in these public health agencies, And many of them have told me, oh, I
Yeah.
used to use DanceSafe services when I was a teenager at going to raves,
Yeah,
right?
you talked about that for your 60-minute interview, I think it was.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you watched that.
yeah,
So
uh,
it's interesting to see how much things have changed and to know that I played a big role in that.
yeah,
Uh, it's inspiring and it keeps me going. Um, the other thing that keeps me going is I talk to a lot of families uh, like you, mostly
yeah.
mothers who have
Oh,
lost
gosh.
loved ones,
Yeah,
and they want to do something and they recognize the importance of harm reduction, and they tell me, that they appreciate what I've done, and I always try to help them out. And I can't imagine losing a child. I have two adult stepchildren now, and it's like I can I can I can think about getting a autoimmune disorder and suffering that like what I'm dealing with right now far more easily than I can think about losing one of my stepchildren. Like just till you raise children, you just don't know what that's like. And the
yeah,
courage and the commitment from these parents who've lost kids to try to solve the problem
yeah.
has
Maybe,
inspired me a lot.
yeah, maybe next month. I'd like to maybe have a call with you and my aunt. I think that'd be really great. Yeah, because it's. I mean, you can see it in her. Like she went through a lot.
Was the brother and sister the
Oh,
same?
Saints, yeah, yeah.
That's terrible. That's so terrible.
Yeah. Yeah, and Emily, the one that passed away last year, she really wasn't like no one would like say she had like a drug problem or anything. It's just unfortunate situation. Um and yeah,
But
it's
they
just
don't know what drug it was.
I I don't know. I can we might know, but I need to look more into it with my aunt
Okay.
because at the time at the hospital we didn't know, but as time developed, I'm not sure if we found out an answer or not. Um, but yeah, with that aside, you were kind of mentioning how you're able to change people's minds in like the so yeah society. And what's your opinion or like when people are coming out about taking psychedelics or being more open about like taking drugs or same thing like basically like just coming out about like illegal drugs, um what do you think they're doing wrong when they're coming out, or like what would you like to see and what would you like to see them not do, like if like for like people like Aaron Rodgers who came out about like taking ayahuasca and others that are like putting out this information, is there anything like you've seen from other people where like you would wish they would put it a different way, or like or you or like anyone that's like promoting either psychedelics or decriminalization? Is there anything like you're liking that they're pushing and not liking like they pushing?
I well, I mean, I have a lot of opinions on different
Okay,
organizations
okay,
and their strategies and tactics. I can tell you what I don't like is when people make distinctions between good drugs and bad drugs.
yeah. That's kind
And
of that's kind of how I wanted to phrase myself when I said psychedelics and then drugs and like yeah, because like yeah, go ahead, but like yeah, I noticed that like that too because I don't like that either.
yeah, so because of the stigma and judgment against drugs in our culture, some people want to elevate their drugs of choice above
Hmm.
others and say, well, ours are the good drugs. And so, in other words, they're willing to throw the opioid users under the bus and say, well, we don't use those bad, we're just psychedelic users, right? That sometimes is referred to psychedelic exceptionalism. And I
Yeah,
always trained dance safe chapters from the very beginning not to be drug chauvinists. That's sort of the phrase I coined 24 years ago, right? There aren't good drugs and bad drugs. There are just drugs, and all drugs have risks. They all have different risk and safety profiles, and you can get in trouble and or die with any drug in a variety of different ways. There's people that overuse cannabis who's never killed anybody, but there's people who have gotten into trouble with cannabis, and so we can't and then when we talk about decriminalization or legalization, there are those who think that the safer drugs should be legalized first. And look, I think we should legalize or decriminalize all drugs, but it should be obvious that the class of drugs that is killing the most people ought to be the one that we legalize and decriminalize first,
Yep.
because we will save more lives. That's why I keep on talking about opioid maintenance programs and opioid of choice maintenance or heroin maintenance. Like, I want to make t-shirts that say bring heroin back, because the iron law of prohibition, which is a term that came about during alcohol prohibition, which refers to the fact that the strongest form of any prohibited drug will take over the market. During alcohol prohibition, you couldn't find beer or wine. All you could find was hard liquor, for the
Easier.
simple reason that you can smuggle it more easily in small spaces. And we have seen that now with fentanyl replacing heroin.
Yep.
It's not the most desirable opioid by far. Most people who have done both will vastly prefer heroin if it weren't for the expense. Fentanyl was cheaper, right? But that's also a result of prohibition. But fentanyl is so difficult to dose and use safely compared to heroin that we're seeing, skyrocketing fatalities. So bring heroin back. Anyway, how did we get off on this? Your question was, oh yeah, psychedelic exceptionalism. The more dangerous drugs that are the more problematic, that more people die and get in trouble with, should be the ones that we reform the system around first, right? Like, so I support though the legalizing mushrooms and decriminalizing, but it really ought not to be an argument based that, well, these are good drugs, these are safer
Yeah.
drugs, therefore we should decriminalize them.
I'd
That
rather save lives. Yeah.
Yeah, that's going about it the wrong way. We need to look at the public policies. And I should bring something up, uh, that the fentanyl crisis began almost immediately after Congress cracked down on the over prescribing of prescription opioids,
Mm.
right? We've seen in the media now, like, all about the uh what was the OxyContin family called? The family that was responsible for selling all the OxyContin, and they've been sued. And anyway, point being, I was thinking the Semblers, but no, those were the anti-drug couple in Florida. The Sackler family. Yeah, the
Okay.
Sacklers who own OxyContin. And of course, yeah, they lied. They said it wasn't addictive. They did all the typical things encouraging doctors to overprescribe it. But what happened was, after Congress passed a law cracking down on these prescriptions, they pushed hundreds of thousands of people into the illicit markets by cutting them off from their prescription oxy. And yes, the very next year, there were like 8,000 fewer deaths from prescription opioids. They saw, like, I forget what it was, a significant percentage reduction in prescription opioid deaths because, well, they cut off the prescription opioids. And then Congress patted themselves on the back. Look what a great job we did. Look how few prescription opioid deaths there are. But they
Yeah.
didn't
They grew.
realize that was vastly overshadowed by the gigantic increase in illicit opioid deaths,
Right.
as they pushed everyone into the, and that's when the fake oxys started appearing around 2015, 16,
Yeah,
which are now everywhere. The
yeah,
blue M30s are just all over the place. And so like it would be far preferable to go back to a system where we just let doctors over prescribe painkillers. We would we would reduce the number of fatalities, you know, tenfold if we just did that. But
not the
then
best solution,
that's not the best solution. The best
but
solution is that is
what we talked about.
not take home opioids, right? Because that's the problem. Like people take these home
Yeah,
and then they take too many and they give them to their sell them to their friends to make money, and then that's not the best solution. Is where you go to a clinic and get your daily dose of opioids that you need. You know, if you can't manage, if you need them for legitimate pain, that's one thing. But if you are taking them for emotional pain or just to cope with whatever is going on in your life, then you need some assistance in doing that and managing that the correct way, which can only really be done with clinic administered opioids, which is what we talked about already in Switzerland and other
yeah,
places. So
yeah. You definitely learn a lot about that in books like Drugs Unlimited and Fentanyl Corporation. Where like, oh, we make something illegal, we're gonna we're gonna find something that's legal, and that's more dangerous until you make that illegal, and then we're gonna find something else that's legal, and then we're going to even more dangerous, and then it's just more and more dangerous. And I really have enjoyed like learning about these topics and like just the history of the drug war, harm reduction, learning about psychedelics, just how interesting they are. And I actually never went to college, and
congratulations.
thank you. Yeah, I never went to college. I graduated high school with a 3.7 GPA. Just got a solid five-figure job working at like a factory and some manufacturer in a warehouse, and have done pretty well for myself outside of academia. But because right after high school, I never had something that like I really wanted to do, so I figured I could just get a decent job, save up money, and um, endeavor in something after I already have like a base for myself. And I've kind of done that now. And as I'm learning, like, do you have any like advice for me on in terms of being efficient and learning? Like, yeah, like any advice for me? Because I just
In terms of learning,
yeah, in terms of learning,
huh,
um, I'm like I'm pretty good at learning, but like I am like fascinated by people that can just do so well in academia, where like I just want to be able to like rattle off stuff, and like it like takes an
yeah.
incredible like
So
I take a lot of notes, but like is there anything that's like made you like really like prepared for like a speech or an event or like a program that's like really like where like you can just rattle things off the top of your head? I know it takes time and repetition and notes, but anything that you found that's made you efficient and like really like feel like really well, like a
so
really solid base for yourself.
so I graduated valedictorian of my
Nice.
Florida State University, but I really feel that I had to fight in that culture to learn, because the way in which academia channels you into specific topics with testing, with papers you have to write, like I like have always learned better when I've had outside of universities, when I've had the freedom to pursue the intellectual path in the way that I've wanted. So you read a book and then something in the book really interests you, and then you go and you find books about that,
Yeah.
instead of having to focus on like picking a topic and writing just about that. academia trains you to be an academic. Success in academia is success in perpetuating the academic paradigm. But if you love learning and you can read and understand, and just having the freedom to pursue whatever books, topics, and discussions. Like, so one great thing about college to me was that it was an environment where you readily had a lot of intellectually interested people who, and so there was a lot of people to talk to. But that was back before the internet, right? These days, we actually can find people who are interested in learning about the topics that we're interested in. And so, other than reading, talking with people and bouncing ideas around is really important. Having a community of peers interested in the same topics you're interested in to talk to about, and learn from your mistakes. And so those are the two ways, I think, just reading and talking in groups with people about issues that really help us learn. And then learning to me has always been a praxis as well, right? That's a word, kind of I don't know if it was Marx, but could have been Paulo Freire, who was a popular educator in Brazil. I founded DanceSafe on the principles of Paulo Freire, whose system was called popular education. And it was directly counterposed to sort of the standard academic structure of education, where we look at students as being these empty vessels and the teacher is having all the knowledge and just sort of pouring the knowledge in, where the students just sit there and soak up the information. Popular education by this Brazilian educator called Paulo Freire was mixed with doing and activism. He was a revolutionary, and one of his favorite quotes, by the way, was, "The goal is not just to liberate yourselves from your oppressors, but also to liberate your oppressors at the same time." Paraphrasing, it was something like that.
Okay.
But it was about learning through doing and learning through practice. And I think that he may have, or might have been Marx, who came up with praxis, the idea of knowledge advancing through doing,
Okay.
right? And so, I mean, my life's kind of is an example of that, how I've,
Yeah.
studied drugs and studied drug policy and harm reduction and created things and learned from the things that I was creating, and learned from the volunteers in DanceSafe that really shaped the direction of the organization, being willing to change, put into practice, make mistakes, correct those mistakes. Um, in social science, in a way, you can see it like a science, right? Scientific method is one about experimentation, trial and error, practice, replication, and discussing results and processes with a community of peers. You put the same principles in practice in the social sciences, in public health and harm reduction, and you can learn that way. I mean, I don't know if that's advice for you, right? Because people go to college typically, like they don't typically go to college to learn. They go to college because they want a career in order to make money, because we have created a society where you can't get higher paying jobs typically unless you have degrees, right? It's a meritocracy. Not that you need a degree to be good at many of these jobs, but they force you to
Yeah.
go in debt to pay and make all this money. So if you don't have monetary concerns and you just want to learn, well, hell, go to college, see if it works out. You can always blow your loans off. That's what I did. I used my student loans to start DanceSafe, and never paid a dime on them, because I've always been self-employed. So they've never been able to garnish my tax returns. They've never been able to garnish my wages. And I've just never paid any money back. And then I got good credit 7 years later, and I ended up having credit cards and using them. So never blowing off my student loan money never impacted me, but I am a little lucky that way. Some people
Yeah.
aren't as lucky to be self-employed their whole life, and then they have to. But anyway, like, so go to college if you want.
Yeah.
But there are ways that you can learn if you're motivated, that you don't need to.
Yeah. I was thinking about it, but like either way, even if I didn't, I'm 23. I wasn't. Um, I go back in my head back and forth about going to college, but more importantly, like I'm just going to like learn outside, even if I don't go to college. But it definitely I take away a lot from what you said about just being about like being more active, like going to events or just like doing whatever you're learning rather than like just like learning about it and like reading a books, but like being about it and having conversations helps more. So yeah, I just find things fascinating and just want to learn, and it's just crazy that what's out there just like in like a general thing in life. Like there's so much to explore, to help other people, to help yourself, to improve society. Like so,
I can see that in you. I
thank
mean,
you.
just requesting the to talk to me shows you're inspired to
And
learn and
I
do.
yeah,
So
it just feels like you have a wealth of knowledge, and gosh, like I like
did
there.
did you tell me before this talk that you'd volunteered recently?
Yeah, I was gonna say that too. I was like, yeah.
Great. Yeah, yeah.
I was gonna tell you like, yeah, I'm also looking forward like for volunteering to like to learn more from other people. Because it definitely seems like people could be and are definitely educated like and like these ideas and just bouncing around like things that like I've been learning and like actually like not putting them to the test, but like um when you talk about something, you more embedded in like your memory. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah. You get the when you speak about something, you get muscle memory in your voice, your throat, and your brain, your neurons.
yeah,
Yeah, I always like when I work with parents who want to get involved in harm reduction, and they're nervous at first because they don't know how to talk the talk.
yeah. You see,
Have
they
them, I'll have them repeat sentences. I'll say, "I want you to say this 5 times to me."
this is the whole conversation
Yeah,
about bringing up education in the first place because like I want to be able to talk the talk like you're talking about. Yeah,
it just comes with practice. It
yeah.
comes with continuing to speak it, and then seeing how people respond, and then you get to know what works better with certain types of people, and like,
Field testing. That's when you're talking about scientific method.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
all of that. Well, I need to get going because I have a
Yes.
3:15 meeting.
Yes. But this is a good place
But
to wrap up. Thank you so much, Emmanuel. Good luck with your fentanyl test strips with CVS and other markets that you're working on. Appreciate your time, and I'll talk to you here in this short future.
yeah,
Um,
call me anytime. You can find
yes.
my number easily anywhere too. Feel free to call me. I always answer my phone as well.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you so much, Emmanuel.